The insulin pen clattered against the concrete as Officer Martinez's latex glove released it into the metal trash bin. Maya Rodriguez watched in horror as her lifeline disappeared among the discarded cigarette butts and empty soda cans. Her vision already beginning to blur at the edges. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Riverside Park, and somewhere in the distance, a woman's shrill voice continued its relentless assault on her eardrums. I told you, needles drug paraphernalia. Right there in broad daylight. Karen Weatherby's manicured finger stabbed the air like a weapon, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never questioned her own righteousness. That girl was shooting up right in front of children. Maya's knees buckled. The world tilted sideways as her blood sugar plummeted, and she felt herself falling toward the unforgiving asphalt. Her best friend Jessica lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. But Maya could feel the weakness spreading through her limbs like ice water in her veins. Maya, stay with me. Jessica's voice seemed to echo from far away, though she was right there, her warm hands gripping Maya's shoulders. Officers, please. You don't understand. She's diabetic. She needs that insulin. She's going to die without it. Officer Martinez, a 20-year veteran with kind eyes that had seen too much, hesitated for the first time since arriving at the scene. His partner, Officer Chen, a newer recruit still eager to prove himself, stepped forward with his hand resting on his radio. Ma'am, we need to follow protocol, Chen said, his voice steady but uncertain. Drug paraphernalia is drug paraphernalia, regardless of the story. The afternoon had started so differently. Maya had been looking forward to this moment for weeks. After months of careful planning and saving, she had finally convinced her overprotective mother to let her spend the day at Riverside Park with her friends. It was supposed to be a celebration. Her latest A1C results had come back perfect. Her blood sugar management was better than ever, and for the first time in years, she felt like a normal teenager. She had packed her medical supplies carefully in her discreet black bag, the same one she carried to school every day. Her insulin pens, glucose tablets, testing strips, and emergency glucagon kit were all neatly organized in labeled compartments. Her endocrinologist had praised her responsibility. Her mother had finally relaxed her constant vigilance, and Maya had felt free. The park had been alive with the sounds of a perfect autumn day. Children's laughter echoed from the playground. Couples walked hand in hand along the winding paths, and the air smelled of fallen leaves and the last barbecues of the season. Maya and her friends had claimed a picnic table near the duck pond, spreading out their homework and snacks, enjoying the luxury of studying outdoors. It was 3:47 p.m. when Maya felt the familiar sensation. The slight tremor in her hands, the subtle shift in her vision, the quiet internal alarm that meant her blood sugar was beginning to rise. She had eaten lunch at noon, and her Dexcom continuous glucose monitor was alerting her through her phone that it was time for her afternoon insulin dose. She had been discreet about it, as always. Moving slightly away from the table, she opened her medical bag and retrieved her insulin pen. The process took less than 30 seconds. Remove the cap, dial the dose, pinch a fold of skin on her thigh. Inject. Count to 10. Withdraw. It was as routine as breathing, as natural as blinking. She had done it thousands of times before without incident. But Karen Weatherby had been watching. Karen lived in the Victorian house that overlooked the park, the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and the security cameras mounted at every corner. She spent her days monitoring the neighborhood through her front window, cataloging the comings and goings of everyone she deemed suspicious. At 53, she had appointed herself the unofficial guardian of community morals, armed with a smartphone and an unshakable belief in her own judgment. The moment she saw Maya with the pen-like device, her mind had leaped to the worst possible conclusion. Drug use. In her park. In front of children. The thought sent a surge of righteous indignation through her chest, and her fingers were dialing 911 before she had taken a second look. 911. What's your emergency? Yes. I need police at Riverside Park immediately. There's a young Hispanic girl here injecting drugs right out in the open. She's got needles, and there are children everywhere. This is exactly the kind of thing that's destroying our neighborhood. The dispatcher, trained to take all calls seriously, had sent the nearest patrol car. Officers Martinez and Chen arrived within 6 minutes, their presence immediately drawing attention from everyone in the park. Maya looked up from her homework as the police car pulled into the parking lot, thinking nothing of it until she saw Karen marching toward them, her face flushed with excitement. Officers! Officers! That's her right there! Karen's voice cut through the peaceful afternoon like a siren. The one with the black bag. I saw her injecting drugs with my own eyes. Maya felt the blood drain from her face as 3 sets of eyes turned toward her. The familiar weight of judgment settled on her shoulders. The same feeling she got when people stared at her Dexcom sensor or whispered about her medical alert bracelet. But this was different. This was dangerous. Miss, we need to speak with you. Officer Martinez called out, his tone professional but not unkind. Maya's friends exchanged worried glances as she stood up, her legs suddenly unsteady. Is there a problem? Officer? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel her heart rate increasing, which would only make her blood sugar management more difficult. We received a report of drug activity in the park, Officer Chen said, stepping forward. We need to search your bag. But it's not drugs, Maya protested, her voice gaining strength. It's my medical supplies. I'm diabetic. I was just taking my insulin. Karen snorted from behind the officers. That's what they all say. I've watched enough crime shows to know a drug user when I see one. Look at her. She's probably high right now. Maya's hands were shaking, but not from any substance. Fear and frustration coursed through her veins as she realized the gravity of her situation. She reached slowly into her bag, withdrawing her insulin pen and holding it up for the officers to see. This is an insulin pen, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I have type 1 diabetes. I've had it since I was 7 years old. I need to take insulin multiple times a day to stay alive. Officer Martinez examined the device, turning it over in his hands. It did look medical. He had to admit. The labeling was clear. The packaging professional. But Karen's voice rose again, cutting through his moment of doubt. Don't let her fool you. Drug dealers are getting more sophisticated these days. They disguise everything to look legitimate. I've seen the news reports, and look at her friends. They're probably all in on it. Jessica stood up from the picnic table, her own voice sharp with anger. Are you insane? Maya's been diabetic since we were kids. She almost died in 3rd grade because she went into ketoacidosis. Her mom had to quit her job to take care of her. That's enough. Officer Chen interrupted, his hand moving to his handcuffs. We need to secure this scene until we can determine what's really going on here. Maya watched in disbelief as Chen began emptying her medical bag onto the picnic table. Her insulin pens, her glucose tablets, her testing supplies, her emergency kit. Each item was handled like evidence, photographed, cataloged. Her most private medical necessities were displayed for everyone in the park to see. Officer, please. Maya tried again, pulling out her phone to show her Dexcom app. Look, this is my continuous glucose monitor. It tracks my blood sugar in real time. I can show you my medical alert bracelet, my prescription bottles, my endocrinologist's contact information. But Karen was already shaking her head vigorously. Phone apps can be faked. Those bracelets can be bought online, officers. You're being played by a very sophisticated operation here. Officer Martinez felt the situation spiraling beyond his control. His instincts told him the girl was telling the truth. But protocol was protocol, and the complainant was insistent. He made the decision that would haunt him for weeks to come. We need to dispose of these materials until we can verify their legitimacy, he announced, gathering Maya's supplies into an evidence bag. It's for public safety. No. Maya lunged forward, desperation giving her courage. You can't throw away my insulin. I need it to live. Please, call my doctor, call my mother, call anyone. But don't take away my medicine. Her voice broke on the last word, and tears began streaming down her face. Around the park, other families had stopped their activities to watch the drama unfold. Children pointed and whispered. Parents pulled them closer. And Maya felt the familiar shame of being different, being sick, being misunderstood. Officer Chen, following his training to the letter, walked toward the park's waste disposal area. Maya watched in horror as he lifted the lid of the large metal bin and prepared to dump her life-saving medication inside. Wait, Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the officer, came running across the grass, her medical bag bouncing against her hip. She had been at the park with her own children when she heard the commotion, and her trained ear had caught the word insulin from across the playground. Officer Chen paused, the evidence bag still in his hands. Ma'am, this is a police matter. Please step back. I'm a physician, Dr. Chen announced, pulling out her medical license and hospital ID. Dr. Sarah Chen, pediatric endocrinologist at Children's Hospital. If that girl is diabetic and you dispose of her insulin, you will be directly responsible for a medical emergency that could result in her death. The authority in her voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. Officer Martinez immediately stepped forward, relief washing over his face at the arrival of someone who could provide clarity. Doctor, can you verify whether these are legitimate medical supplies? He asked, gesturing toward the items spread across the picnic table. Dr. Chen moved quickly to examine Maya's supplies, her practiced eye taking in each item: insulin pens, glucose tablets, ketone strips, glucagon emergency kit, continuous glucose monitor supplies. Everything was exactly what it should be, properly labeled, correctly stored, and clearly medical in nature. These are absolutely legitimate medical supplies for diabetes management, she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. This insulin pen contains Humalog, a rapid-acting insulin analog. These are glucose tablets for treating low blood sugar. This is a glucagon emergency kit for severe hypoglycemia. And this, she held up Maya's Dexcom sensor, is a continuous glucose monitor, a piece of medical technology that costs thousands of dollars and requires a prescription. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by concern as she noticed her vision beginning to blur again. The stress of the situation, combined with the delay in her insulin dose, was causing her blood sugar to spike dangerously high. I need my insulin, she said urgently to Dr. Chen. My blood sugar is over 300 now. I can feel it. Dr. Chen immediately handed Maya one of her insulin pens. How much do you usually take for correction? She asked. 3 units for every 50 over 180, Maya replied, her hands shaking as she dialed the dose. So, about 7 units. As Maya administered her delayed insulin dose, Dr. Chen turned to face Karen, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the medical verification. The doctor's voice carried the weight of years spent fighting for her patient's rights. Ma'am, what you witnessed was a young woman managing a serious chronic illness with remarkable responsibility and discretion. Your accusations could have resulted in serious medical consequences, up to and including death by diabetic ketoacidosis. Karen's face flushed red, but her stubborn streak ran deep. How was I supposed to know it looked exactly like drug use? I was protecting the community. By assuming the worst about a teenager who was quietly managing her health. Dr. Chen's voice rose with righteous anger. By calling the police on a child who was trying to stay alive. Officer Martinez stepped forward, his face grim with the realization of how badly the situation could have gone. Ma'am, he said to Karen, making false reports to emergency services is a serious offense. Your call tied up resources and put a young woman's life at risk. But the damage was already spreading beyond the immediate incident. Other park visitors had been recording the confrontation on their phones, and the footage was already being uploaded to social media. Maya could see people pointing and whispering, their eyes filled with either sympathy or judgment, and she felt the familiar desire to disappear entirely. Dr. Chen noticed Maya's distress and immediately shifted into protective mode. Officers, I'm recommending that this young woman be allowed to gather her belongings and leave this situation immediately. She needs a calm environment to properly manage her blood sugar, and continued stress could result in further medical complications. Jessica and the other friends quickly began packing up their study materials, forming a protective circle around Maya as she slowly recovered from the adrenaline rush. But as they prepared to leave, Karen made one final attempt to justify her actions. I still think I did the right thing, she announced loudly. Better safe than sorry. If more people called the police when they saw suspicious activity, we wouldn't have these problems in our neighborhood. That statement proved to be the spark that ignited a much larger fire. Over the next several hours, the video clips from the park incident spread across social media platforms with viral intensity. The hashtag #Insulin Not Drugs began trending locally, then regionally, then nationally. Maya's story resonated with thousands of people who had experienced medical discrimination, chronic illness stigma, or simply felt outraged by the injustice they witnessed. Dr. Chen, who had returned home angry and disturbed by what she had witnessed, began making phone calls, first to the park district, then to the police department, then to local diabetes advocacy groups. Her detailed account of the incident, combined with her medical credentials, gave weight to the growing outcry. Maya, meanwhile, spent the evening at home with her family, trying to process what had happened. Her mother, Elena Rodriguez, had been beside herself with anger and fear when Maya recounted the day's events. As a single mother who had spent years fighting insurance companies, school districts, and medical providers to ensure her daughter received proper care, Elena understood the broader implications of what Karen had done. Mija, this isn't just about you, Elena said, holding her daughter close on their living room couch. This is about every diabetic child who might face this same situation. This is about people who think they can judge what they don't understand. Maya's phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from classmates, teachers, and strangers who had seen the videos online. But mixed in with the support were the inevitable negative comments. The people who sided with Karen, who believed that calling the police was always the right choice, regardless of the consequences. By the next morning, The story had been picked up by local news outlets. Reporter Amanda Torres from Channel 7. News arrived at Maya's house early, asking for an interview. Maya was hesitant at first, but Dr. Chen called to encourage her to speak out. Maya, you have the opportunity to educate people about diabetes and prevent this from happening to other children. Dr. Chen explained over the phone. Your voice matters in this conversation. The news interview took place in Maya's living room, with her mother beside her for support. Maya spoke calmly and clearly about living with type 1 diabetes, the daily challenges of managing blood sugar, and the fear she felt when her life-saving medication was nearly destroyed. I've been diabetic for almost 10 years, Maya told the camera, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I take insulin 4 to 6 times every day. It's not optional. It's not recreational. It's not a choice. Without insulin, I would die within days. When Officer Chen threw my insulin pen in that trash can, he was throwing away my lifeline. The interview aired that evening, and by the next day, the story had exploded into national news. Diabetes advocacy organizations, civil rights groups, and medical professionals across the country were weighing in on the incident. The American Diabetes Association issued a statement calling for better training for law enforcement officers regarding medical devices and conditions. Karen Weatherby, meanwhile, found herself at the center of a storm she had never anticipated. Her name and address had been posted online. Her phone rang constantly with angry calls, and protesters had begun gathering outside her Victorian house. Local news crews camped on her street, hoping for a statement or an apology that never came. Instead, Karen doubled down on her position. In a phone interview with a conservative radio host, she maintained that she had done nothing wrong and that the community was safer because of her vigilance. I stand by my actions, she declared over the airwaves. I saw suspicious activity, and I reported it. That's what responsible citizens do. If this girl really has diabetes, she should have been more careful about how she appeared in public. Those words proved to be the final straw for Maya's community. The Riverside Park incident had awakened something in the local diabetes community that had been simmering for years. Parents who had watched their children face discrimination at school, adults who had been questioned about their medical devices at airports, families who had fought insurance battles and dealt with ignorant comments from strangers. They all saw themselves in Maya's story, and they were ready to take action. Dr. Chen organized the response with the efficiency of a military campaign. Within 48 hours of Karen's radio interview, a diabetes awareness rally was planned for the following Saturday at Riverside Park. The location was deliberately chosen, a reclaiming of the space where Maya had been victimized. The rally planning committee included endocrinologists, certified diabetes educators, parents of diabetic children, and adults living with both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. They coordinated with local law enforcement to ensure a peaceful event, reached out to city officials for permits and support, and organized a comprehensive educational program. Maya was asked to be one of the speakers, and after much discussion with her family, she agreed. The thought of speaking in public terrified her, but she understood that her voice could help prevent other children from experiencing what she had gone through. The rally was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, but people began arriving at Riverside Park before dawn. Local diabetes support groups came with educational booths and materials. Medical professionals offered free blood sugar screenings and diabetes risk assessments. Families brought homemade signs with messages like, "Insulin saves lives," and "Educate before you discriminate." By 9 a.m., over 500 people had gathered in the park. The crowd included not just diabetes advocates, but community members who had been moved by Maya's story and wanted to show their support. Local politicians arrived to make statements. News crews set up their equipment, and the atmosphere buzzed with purpose and determination. Maya arrived at 9:30 with her family, her friends, and Dr. Chen. She wore a simple blue dress and her medical alert bracelet, and her Dexcom sensor was visible on her arm. She had decided to make her medical devices as visible as possible, refusing to hide the reality of her condition any longer. As she walked through the crowd toward the makeshift stage, people reached out to touch her shoulder, to offer words of encouragement, to share their own stories of living with diabetes. Maya felt overwhelmed by the support, but also empowered by the realization that she was not alone in her struggle. The rally began with Dr. Chen providing medical education about diabetes, explaining the difference between type 1 and type 2, the role of insulin in the body, and the technology that helps people manage their condition. She spoke clearly and simply, ensuring that everyone in the audience could understand the basic facts about a disease that affects over 30 million Americans. Several other speakers followed, including a police officer from a neighboring city who had received specialized training in recognizing medical emergencies, a parent whose diabetic son had been suspended from school for carrying his glucose tablets, and a college student who had been denied housing because of her insulin pump. When it came time for Maya to speak, the crowd fell silent. She walked to the microphone with her notes in hand. But as she looked out at the sea of supportive faces, she realized she didn't need them. Her words came from her heart, from years of living with a condition that made her different, from the fear she had felt when her medication was taken away, and from the hope she now felt for change. "My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I am not a drug user," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the park. "I am a 17-year-old honor student who happens to have type 1 diabetes. 3 days ago, my life-saving medication was almost thrown in the trash because one person chose to see a crime where none existed." She paused, looking directly at the news cameras that would carry her words far beyond Riverside Park. "But I'm not here today to talk about that person's ignorance. I'm here to talk about education, understanding, and the power of community to create change." Maya spoke for 15 minutes about living with diabetes, about the daily reality of managing blood sugar, about the fear that comes with depending on medication for survival. She talked about the discrimination faced by people with chronic illnesses, the assumptions made by those who don't understand, and the importance of choosing compassion over suspicion. "Every diabetic in America manages their condition differently," she explained to the crowd. "Some use insulin pens like I do. Others use insulin pumps. Some use syringes, and some use inhalers. We test our blood sugar multiple times a day. We count carbohydrates. We adjust our doses based on exercise and stress and illness. We are not hiding our medical care from you. We are living our lives with a chronic condition, and we deserve to do so without fear of discrimination or harassment." As Maya concluded her speech, the crowd erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. People were wiping away tears, holding up their own medical devices, and chanting, "Educate, don't discriminate." The energy was electric, transformative, and it marked a turning point not just for Maya, but for the entire community's understanding of diabetes. But the most powerful moment came when Maya stepped down from the stage and was approached by a young boy, maybe 8 years old, who was holding his mother's hand and wearing an insulin pump visible through his thin t-shirt. "Are you the insulin girl?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity rather than judgment. Maya knelt down to his level, smiling gently. "I'm Maya. Are you diabetic too?" The boy nodded eagerly. "I got diabetes when I was 5. My mom says I'm brave. but sometimes kids at school say mean things about my pump." "You are brave," Maya told him firmly. "And your pump is helping keep you healthy, so you can grow up big and strong. Don't ever let anyone make you feel bad about taking care of yourself." The boy's mother had tears in her eyes as she watched the interaction. "Thank you," she whispered to Maya. "He's been so worried since he saw the news about what happened to you. He thought the police might take away his insulin too." That conversation crystallized for Maya why the rally mattered, why speaking out mattered, why education mattered. It wasn't just about her own experience anymore. It was about creating a world where diabetic children could manage their health without fear, where medical devices were recognized and respected, where differences were met with understanding rather than suspicion. The rally continued for another 2 hours, with educational presentations, community resource sharing, and networking among families affected by diabetes. Local elected officials made commitments to improve training for first responders. School districts pledged to review their policies regarding medical devices, and several businesses announced new programs to support employees with chronic illnesses. Meanwhile, across town, Karen Weatherby watched the news coverage from behind her closed curtains. The protesters outside her house had grown in number throughout the morning, and their chants could be heard clearly through her windows. Karen called the cops. Maya almost died. Education, not discrimination, they shouted in rhythmic unison. For the first time since making that 911 call, Karen began to feel the weight of what she had done. The young woman on television didn't look like the drug user she had imagined. Maya looked like any teenager, articulate and intelligent, surrounded by a loving family and supportive community. The medical evidence was overwhelming, the expert testimony undeniable. But Karen's pride ran deeper than her growing discomfort, and she remained barricaded in her house, refusing interviews and avoiding accountability for her actions. The consequences for Karen's false report began to unfold systematically over the following weeks. The local police department, stung by the negative publicity and recognizing the serious policy implications of the incident, launched a formal investigation into the handling of Maya's case. Officer Martinez received additional training on medical devices and chronic illness management, and he personally called Maya to apologize for his role in the incident. Officer Chen, whose eagerness to follow protocol had nearly resulted in tragedy, was placed on administrative leave pending a review of his decision-making process. The police department also announced new training protocols for all officers, developed in partnership with local medical professionals and diabetes advocates. The curriculum would include recognition of common medical devices, understanding of chronic illness management, and procedures for verifying legitimate medical equipment. Karen faced more serious consequences. The district attorney's office, responding to public pressure and the clear evidence of a false report, filed charges against her for filing a false police report and public endangerment. The charges carried potential fines of up to $5,000 and possible jail time. Additionally, the Park District, which had been receiving hundreds of complaints about Karen's harassment of park visitors, issued a formal ban preventing her from entering any city-owned recreational facilities. The Victorian house that had been her watchtower overlooking Riverside Park was no longer a position of power, but a prison of her own making. Local businesses, responding to the public outcry, began refusing to serve Karen. Her regular coffee shop, her grocery store, even her hair salon quietly let her know that she was no longer welcome. The community that she had claimed to be protecting had rejected her protection and her presence. Most painfully for Karen, her own adult children, who lived in other states and had seen the news coverage, called to express their embarrassment and disappointment. Her daughter, a nurse practitioner, who understood exactly what Maya had been going through, was particularly harsh in her assessment. "Mom, you nearly killed a child because of your prejudices," her daughter told her during a painful phone conversation. "You saw a Hispanic teenager with medical equipment and immediately assumed the worst. Do you understand how that looks? Do you understand what that says about who you've become?" But even as Karen faced the consequences of her actions, the positive changes sparked by Maya's experience continued to ripple outward through the community. The Diabetes Awareness Rally had energized advocates across the region, leading to the formation of a new organization called Diabetes Education Alliance. The DEA, led by Dr. Chen and Maya's mother Elena, began working with schools, police departments, and community organizations to provide comprehensive education about diabetes and other chronic illnesses. They developed training materials, speaker programs, and resource guides that would be distributed throughout the state. Maya became the organization's youth ambassador, speaking at schools and community events about living with diabetes. Her natural speaking ability and compelling personal story made her an effective advocate, and she discovered a passion for education and public health that would eventually influence her college and career choices. The medical community also responded to the incident with renewed commitment to patient advocacy. Children's Hospital established a new patient rights program, providing legal and educational support for families facing discrimination related to chronic illnesses. Dr. Chen was appointed to lead the program, using her experience from the Riverside Park incident to help other families navigate similar challenges. Insurance companies, responding to the national attention focused on diabetes management, began reviewing their coverage policies for continuous glucose monitors, insulin pumps, and other diabetes technology. Several major insurers announced expanded coverage options, making life-saving technology more accessible to families who had previously been denied. The ripple effects extended beyond the diabetes community as well. Disability rights advocates used Maya's story to highlight broader issues of medical discrimination and the need for better education about invisible disabilities. The incident became a case study in law enforcement training programs, medical ethics courses, and community organizing workshops. 6 months after the Riverside Park incident, Maya returned to the same picnic table where her medical emergency had begun. This time, she was accompanied by a group of newly diagnosed diabetic teenagers and their families, part of a peer support program she had helped develop. The park looked exactly the same, but everything felt different. Where she had once felt shame and fear about managing her diabetes in public, Maya now felt confidence and purpose. Her insulin pen was no longer something to hide, but a tool she used openly and without apology. The most important thing to remember, she told the group of teenagers as she demonstrated proper injection technique, is that diabetes doesn't define you, but it also doesn't need to be hidden. You have the right to manage your health wherever you are, whenever you need to. And if anyone questions that right, you have an entire community ready to support you. One of the newer participants, a 14-year-old girl named Sophia, who had been diagnosed just a month earlier, raised her hand tentatively. But what if people stare? What if they think I'm doing something wrong? Maya smiled, remembering her own fears from years past. Some people will always stare at what they don't understand. But the more we educate, the more we normalize diabetes management, the fewer people will make those assumptions. Every time you test your blood sugar in public, every time you take insulin without hiding, you're helping the next diabetic person who comes along. As the support group session continued, Maya noticed a familiar figure walking along the park's perimeter. Dr. Chen approached their table with a warm smile, carrying a cooler bag filled with educational materials and emergency supplies. "How's everyone doing today, Doctor?" Chen asked, settling into a chair beside Maya. "Any questions about diabetes management that I can help answer?" The teenagers peppered her with questions about new technology, college planning with diabetes, career considerations, and dating with a chronic illness. "Doctor," Chen answered each question with patience and expertise. But Maya noticed that she often deferred to Maya's experiential knowledge, recognizing that peer support was often more powerful than medical advice. As the afternoon wound down and families began packing up their belongings, Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The same park, where she had felt so alone and victimized now, hosted regular diabetes education sessions, support groups, and awareness events. The community that had once been divided by ignorance and fear was now united by understanding and compassion. Karen Weatherby's Victorian house still overlooked the park, but its windows remained curtained and its occupant remained isolated. The legal proceedings against her had concluded with a plea agreement that included community service, a substantial fine, and mandatory education about disability rights and chronic illness management. She had been required to attend Maya's diabetes awareness presentations as part of her community service, sitting in the back of auditoriums and community centers, listening as Maya shared her story with compassion and grace. Karen never approached Maya directly, never offered a personal apology. But those who observed her during the sessions noted a gradual change in her demeanor, a softening of the rigid certainty that had driven her to make that fateful 911 call. The Park District had used the incident as an opportunity to install new educational signage throughout Riverside Park, including information about invisible disabilities, chronic illness management, and community resources. The signs featured Maya's photo and a quote from her rally speech: "Differences are not dangerous. Ignorance is dangerous. Education is the antidote to fear." As Maya packed her medical supplies into her bag at the end of the support group session, she reflected on how much her life had changed in the months since that terrifying afternoon. She had discovered a voice she didn't know she possessed, a strength she hadn't realized she carried, and a purpose that extended far beyond her personal experience. Her college applications were complete, with several essays focusing on her advocacy work and her plans to study public health and policy. The University of California had already offered her early admission, impressed by both her academic achievements and her community leadership. She planned to continue her diabetes advocacy work in college, perhaps eventually pursuing a career in healthcare policy or medical law. But more immediately, Maya was looking forward to her senior year of high school, her continued work with the Diabetes Education Alliance, and the upcoming National Diabetes Awareness Conference, where she had been invited to deliver the keynote address. As she walked toward her mother's car, Maya paused at the trash bin where her insulin pen had nearly been discarded months earlier. The metal container had been replaced with a new one, painted bright blue with educational messages about medical waste disposal and community respect. She thought about the butterfly effect that had emerged from that moment of crisis. One woman's ignorance had nearly caused a medical emergency, but it had also sparked a movement that was now improving the lives of diabetic people across the country. Educational programs were being implemented in schools. Police departments were updating their training protocols, and thousands of families were receiving better support for chronic illness management. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica, her best friend who had been with her during the original incident. "Saw your interview on the news today. You were amazing as always. Proud to be your friend." Another message came in from Dr. Chen. "Great job with the support group today. You're becoming an excellent educator. The medical community is lucky to have advocates like you." As Maya settled into the passenger seat of her mother's car, Elena Rodriguez looked at her daughter with obvious pride. "How do you feel?" Miha, good session today. Really good. Mom. Sophia is doing much better with her blood sugar management. And the new families seem to be adjusting well. Maya buckled her seatbelt and checked her Dexcom app, noting that her blood sugar was perfectly stable. I think we're making a real difference. Elena smiled as she started the car. You know, when you were first diagnosed, I was so afraid of what your life would be like. I worried about discrimination, about limitations, about whether you would be able to pursue your dreams. I never imagined that your diabetes would become a platform for helping others. Me neither, Maya admitted. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if that woman hadn't called the police that day. Maybe I would have finished my homework, gone home, and never thought about advocacy, or education, or community organizing. But she did call, Elena said quietly. And you chose to respond with education instead of anger, with compassion instead of revenge. That choice changed everything. As they drove home through the familiar neighborhoods of their community, Maya noticed the subtle changes that had occurred over the past months. The coffee shop, where she and her friends studied, displayed diabetes awareness pamphlets near the register. The library hosted monthly chronic illness support meetings. The high school had updated its policies regarding medical devices and emergency protocols. These changes weren't dramatic or flashy, but they represented a fundamental shift in how the community approached differences and medical needs. Maya had helped create an environment where the next diabetic teenager wouldn't face the same discrimination she had experienced. At home, Maya settled into her routine evening diabetes management. She checked her blood sugar, calculated her insulin dose for dinner, and updated her logbook with the day's readings. These actions, which had once felt burdensome and isolating, now felt empowering and purposeful. Her phone rang, and she was surprised to see a call from a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously, unsure who might be calling. Maya, this is Officer Martinez from the Riverside Park incident. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Maya's heart rate increased slightly, but her voice remained steady. Of course. Officer Martinez. How can I help you? I wanted you to know that our department just graduated our first class of officers, who received the new medical device training that was developed after your incident. I was one of the instructors, and I shared your story with every single recruit. Maya felt a warm glow of satisfaction. That's wonderful. I hope it will help prevent similar situations in the future. I'm sure it will. But I also wanted to tell you something else. My own niece was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes last month. She's only 9 years old, and her family was terrified about how to handle it. I was able to connect them with Dr. Chen and your support programs, and it's made all the difference in the world. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Officer Martinez sharing updates about the policy changes in his department and asking Maya about her future plans. When they finally hung up, Maya felt a deep sense of completion and purpose. The circle was complete. The incident that had started with fear and ignorance had transformed into education and understanding. The officer, who had nearly disposed of her life-saving medication, was now training others to recognize and respect medical devices. The community that had been divided was now united in support of chronic illness awareness. As Maya prepared for bed that evening, she performed her final blood sugar check of the day and programmed her insulin pump for overnight delivery. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities for advocacy, education, and community building. There would be more speaking engagements, more support group sessions, more chances to transform fear into understanding. She thought about Karen Weatherby, still isolated in her Victorian house. still resistant to the lessons that the community had learned. Maya felt sadness, rather than anger, when she thought about Karen now. The woman had been so consumed by fear and prejudice that she had nearly caused a tragedy, and she had been unable to find the grace to acknowledge her mistakes or grow from the experience. But Maya had learned that change didn't require everyone to participate. It only required enough people to choose education over ignorance, compassion over suspicion, understanding over fear. The community had made that choice, and the ripple effects would continue long after Maya graduated from high school and moved on to the next phase of her life. As she drifted off to sleep, Maya's last conscious thought was of the young boy at the rally who had asked if she was the insulin girl. She had become much more than that. She was an advocate, an educator, a bridge between the medical community and the general public, a voice for everyone who had ever felt judged or misunderstood because of a medical condition. But most importantly, she was still Maya Rodriguez, a 17-year-old honor student who happened to have type 1 diabetes. The incident at Riverside Park had tried to define her by her medical condition in the worst possible way. But she had reclaimed that narrative and transformed it into something powerful and positive. In the end, Karen's 911 call had achieved the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of removing a perceived threat from the community, it had strengthened the community's commitment to inclusion and understanding. Instead of silencing Maya's voice, it had amplified it to reach audiences she never could have imagined. Instead of hiding diabetes management from public view, it had brought chronic illness awareness into the light, where it could be properly understood and supported. The true victory was not just in Karen's punishment, or in the policy changes that followed, but in the transformation of a community's heart. Fear had given way to knowledge. Suspicion had been replaced by support, and ignorance had been overcome by education. Maya's insulin pen, once nearly discarded as drug paraphernalia, had become a symbol of medical necessity, personal strength, and community solidarity. The story that began with a teenager's medical emergency had evolved into a movement that would continue to protect and empower diabetic individuals for years to come. And in that transformation, Maya had discovered not just her own voice, but her life's purpose as well.